I lived there for 20 years. And I never on time, never.
All right, 1 o'clock. Everyone, the meeting of the 4-day ad hoc committee for Tuesday, February 10th, will come to order. And the first order of business is roll call vote. Salmons.
Here.
Richard Smith.
Here.
John Potter.
Here.
That's the best. Here. And chairs. And then in terms of ex officio members, Ray Valco.
Here.
Jim Hackney.
Here.
And Nancy Montalembra. The next item is approval of the minutes. We have one set of minutes from Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Is there a second? I'll call vote. Those things.
I had a.
Yeah, we were just, that's not enough, because I think that we have a farm issue. So do we need to modify those, or they reflect the minutes that were what we talked about?
Yeah, if they reflect the minutes, no modifications, it's more so if they schedule a meeting.
Was there a motion to the minutes? Is there a second? Roll call vote, Bill Salmons.
Yes.
Richard Smith.
Yeah.
John Potter.
Aye.
Cassie West. And chairs. Okay, the next item is old business, which is, feels like new business, the survey results. And that was in the materials that's provided, so thank you, Ray, for sharing those. And we had some support from the League of Cities and Towns in reviewing those. So I did not look at any of the kind of information, only Ray and Jennifer Slattery from the League were able to see any names or anything like that. And these are the ones that we'll put together the results. So I know you've seen them, and but I thought it would be important because of our public body, just quickly go through some slides on the results. So Kirk is going to share those, and we try and get through them quickly because we want to get to our workshop.
We did want to say that I thought we had a really great response survey. It's 20% response rate. And resident. Responses were thoughtful, detailed. Enjoyed reading. We'll see. What else? Yeah.
Didn't put it in the slide mode.
It's, for some reason, it's only doing slide mode on this screen, but
Okay, that's fine. So can you go to the next slide? And this is cumbersome because this is the only way technologically you can do this in this room. So thank you, Cody. I'll be saying next slide along. And just to start, again, these slides were originally put together by Jennifer Slattery from the League of Cities and Towns. And she gave a lot of data. I'm going to move quickly through them, but I thought we would just keep it there because it has kind of chart form and then the raw data, just in case there's any questions. So first of all, as Cassie mentioned, we had a total of 1,069 responses. And then most of the people that responded, more than 80%, are full-time year-round residents. That's just the numbers. Next one, please. Most people have lived in Jamestown more than 20 years. And again, the raw data shows the full breakout of that. A good breakout in terms of areas. Most people living in the village, but are represented across town, across the island. This is sad, it's true. Most of us are above 55. If only I were 55, so, but you can see it's nearly far more than half our age of 5. Good breakout by gender. Basically, most people do not have children in the household. This is very similar, I think, to the last. This was interesting, most people either visited a few times a month or more in the summer, and that held true in the next slide. Across the other seasons. This next slide, Jennifer Slattery tried to rank order in terms of the most often used amenities, so open space, then dog walking, hiking trails, beaches, etc. So green is 1 to 2 times a week, blue is 1 to 2 times a month, yellow a few times, orange to use, and the aqua is just in the summer. So this will all be available on the website as well. This is just the raw numbers. The next one, there was an open-ended question here, just anything else you'd like to add about how you use Fort Getty, and the number one response was walking and exercise, things like biking, etc., jogging, water sports was the next one. There was a few things that were listed that mentioned that we didn't ask in the survey. Yoga being one, slightly. We asked what prevents you from using Fort Getty more often, and the most respondents indicated that nothing prevents them. Some people said that they're too crowded, particularly in the summer. Some people mentioned they didn't feel safe. This as well. Again, all of this is available to anybody or on the website under Fort Getty. In terms of how people feel with the condition of following amenities overall, people felt pretty good, very satisfied or satisfied. We had a number of other questions regarding beaches, boat ramp, etc. The next one is the top. If you're not satisfied, we asked what are the top 3 areas. And not surprisingly, restrooms come number 1. Boat ramp we heard about a lot, which is kind of frustrating because sometimes I'm sure there's a lot that we can do. We want to do that. With having an emphasized open space, durable structures. Then again, there were open-ended questions, and I just put these into Claude AI, and these were in the summary of most cited. I think at every chance possible, there's a group of individuals that were using the open-ended comments to indicate how they were feeling about RV camping. And both sides were well represented in open-ended answers. Restrooms, dog management is a big issue. I cited some of the details around open space because I thought those would be important as we go into the workshop. People's opinions about the natural environment. And again, these are in terms of frequency. There are some new ideas for new amenities, pool, fitness exercise, cultural programming, more kayak crafts. I think this is straightforward. Have you ever RV camped? Most people said no. Have you ever take camped? A few more people had. Have you ever rented a pavilion? Again, more frequency for that. And then in terms of the overall question, what do you think of the current conditions? And most people thought minor upgrades, fine. A fair number wanting substantial improvements. There's some questions about who's thinking what in this area, and we'll try and maybe dig into that one. On question 19, we asked, what would you like town to focus on in terms of improvements? And this is just really hard to read. So Jennifer did a quick scan of what were the top 5 responses in terms of what people would strongly prefer, and then what some would prefer. These were the responses to that. Nature preserve, restrooms, again, space, community activities, farmers market. And then these questions about open space were all pretty much equal in terms of protecting, conserving landscape. I kind of, these we blended in mind together as well. I'm not quite sure about some of the distinctions, but they're all obviously important to people. We asked about revenue generation, and again, most people think that it's very important, essential, someone, very few. No less than 20% think it's not important. And then similarly, we asked, what about new revenue generating ideas? Well, that was kind of less essential, but still someone. Asked, which best reflects your preference for revenue generating ideas. See this again. Right hand and there's still. This one is about expanding, maintaining, reducing, or eliminating, and most people really fell into the maintain. Some variants around expanding, reducing, clearly mostly in terms of maintaining RV tent camping, and then I think there's real interest in expanding pavilion use. So we asked this question and people got really angry at this question. If we reduced or took away RV and tent camping, how would you propose using the area? And these were the organized responses. There were 662 responses to that question, and a third of them refused to answer. This was annoying to them. We asked the question, but here were some of the other things: open space, events, and recreation. And then we just asked generally open-ended. The last question of the survey was, okay, anything else you want to be sure that the committee knows? These were the top, there's the top 10, there's the top 4 on the slide, next slide is 6. And started with the most frequently answered question was the answer, most frequently provided response was for keep RV tent camping. Then the next one was to eliminate or reduce RV camping. Revenue is important, maintain as it is, don't overdevelop. Next slide, please. And then infrastructure upgrades, as resident access. Dog related issues came through a lot of things. 10th on the list here. So that was it. That's a summary of these. The additional thoughts from members about what they saw when they were going through the findings. A lot. Yeah.
I was very pleased also with how many people responded. I guess in some ways I was had anticipated more. More response than and I sure hope that the age distribution is not representative. There were a couple of things that surprised me, even though I heard discussed about this topic before. In some ways, the amount of dissatisfaction among folks and behavior of some dogs and some dogs. That's, I don't really think there's a lot that we can do in this week, saying some question of fencing. But I think that just surprised me. Other than passing, and then kind of move on to say, I'm not quite sure what this community does about that topic. I also was struck by on question 19, how many people brought up a desire, whether it was in the tabulated data or in the free text fields, how many people brought up an ambition for community? And I can understand that. And in some ways, some of the letters that came in about what other parks are doing, and how they create community activities. I think in some ways one of the challenges is funding. A lot of it doesn't need interest. A lot of it needs people who want to organize and lead. And it strikes me that it's an interesting conundrum. Certainly, there's a lot of community activity that happens in the park. I think it puts a question on the table in some place for us, but I'm still not sure whether we have the scope of action to crack that nut. Otherwise, any further analysis. It does suggest a focus of this committee on how to make a park which is not dramatically different in intent from today. One which people feel happier about its execution and incremental change to drive attractiveness of users maybe don't go as much as others. Right? It's actually why you said and I do wonder, we could look at all the people who rarely or never go. What are the things, how do they feel about it? The people who say they would like to have significant but not major redevelopment. What is it that they're, because I think you're creating more satisfaction for those group of people who are adjacent to satisfied. Would be quite a good thing.
Curious. Very talented. Each general, most responded 80% of them. But there were.
So I do think we have an opportunity, so both Ray's been working on playing the survey monkey to see what we can do in terms of design. And then we also do, we're working with League of Cities and Towns, so we are not paying them. Jennifer Slattery's volunteered, help us, and she's been amazing, very generous with her time, and she's open to questions. So if we have specific questions that we'd like, that could be really informative. If you're just curious, I think that's fine, because there's something that will drive decision making that will inform action. You can write those down, you get those in an early way. That's where we can ask both Jennifer and Ray.
I think there might be different perspectives on. If you're at a different part of your life.
Future thinking. So I guess the question I ask you to think about, and all of us to think about, is are there particular questions that you'd like to know responses to Saturday of age or just a certain segment of the age population? How do they answer questions 19, 12, and the entire survey? Right? I know she can do that. Yes. Yes.
But I think this. Look at your response. Residents. Students. Use Fort Getty a few times a month or rarely, it's 58%. And it's the same usage pattern in the winter. And then they're mostly using. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to decide, to John's point, it's a good point of, these are the things that came through, and if programming is more important to the respondents. What does that look like? Is it more opportunities for volunteers to be able to have access to certain kinds of facilities and making that very deliberate? Would that be a recommendation? Would be a recommendation for additional staffing at the town level that would be focused on that kind of programming? And then depending on the programming, what kind of infrastructure is needed? I mean, I think that may have a range of answers. Okay, and then, any other questions on this or comments on?
Just a couple, what comes through very clearly is, that many people think is a need for. So even on the question of farms, most people that use, also this, many of them use, do. So that's issues. The second is, that there is this desire for such a adult. There was definitely a minority that the rec center, youth center, as a committee don't really have the scope at the full kind of options and needs for the community. But some of them, one of them, yeah, it was just increasing use, obviously, assessment, having more racial use, perhaps if there's another site in town.
Yeah.
That's
Those ideas that you come up during the workshop.
And like one of the comment about the survey, I was struck by how many items people had to help. Some of the things which have actually been put in place since the last Fort Getty plan don't seem to have a lot of uptake. And I suspect it's not because they were really advised, but that people just don't know. So something to do with that. And or the way we publish our.
Related to that, the kayak,
Yeah.
there's only so many kayak. When we look at 1,000 responses, and magnitude of all of these kayaks.
I actually think there's an analytical point there. I think that's the case where you throw out all the people who have no opinion, never use, in order to figure out how they do.
And I just wanted to say one more thing about Bill's point about the revenue generation. The number was 85%. Essential or very important, they continues to generate. 70. Somewhat important, very important or essential.
And I don't think we should limit ourselves at all. Yeah, I don't know that anyone's gonna recommend a community center there, but I don't think. The only limitation is if the town does anything we'll recommend.
That's gonna. Was what this should leads to is serving up multiple opportunities. Not limiting themselves.
So there was no survey. Is that, Richard, do you have anything you wanna add to this?
No, I was just thinking about the 40% who don't use the park. So that's a lot of answers to say, I don't know about that. Not using the park, so it's gonna skew all those answers anyway, 40%. Because they probably don't know if they're not using the park.
Or, you know, aren't there things that you just don't use? I mean, there's things in Jamestown I just don't go to.
No, I understand that, because even if I use the park, I might not use the flag pit, but
Yeah.
there's already 40% who aren't going there.
Yeah.
So those answers, they're gonna still try to answer most of those questions, if you look at the total number versus the total response. It kind of skews the answer to what may not be. Using the park.
I think the park person.
Yes. Right, but there's still people who know what a park, if they fill out the survey, they're probably still saying, I didn't use that, I didn't use this, or I don't know about them. They're not using the park, so they're not engaged in what's there. You can go and look and say, I don't use the park, but we've already got a lot of numbers saying, we're not using the park. So unless you want to itemize every age group, like we talked about, you could say, what age group, what questions did they answer? How did they answer the questions? How long residency? Did the 20-year answer this way? Did the 5-year answer this way? There's so much data if you want to over extrapolate. I just it's there, we have responses. I don't know how far we can go to keep trying to get down to. I don't call it nitty gritty, but we can overanalyze.
No, that's why I kind of am underscoring that the questions that we ask, they are gonna take time, they're taking. So if they're important, we should not limit ourselves, but try to keep it from just pure curiosity. So I guess to conclude this conversation, if you do have questions about things you'd like to see in greater detail, if you could send those by email to Cody, then we can get those to Ray and Jennifer's side. By Friday?
How long would it take to generate responses to all the answers by Friday? Would it be 2 weeks to another 3 weeks, or is that?
Depends on the question, so I mean, it depends on the question, I think that it depends on the time that people have that day, but I don't think it's gonna take long.
Because I know you're scheduled to have things done, just wonder if we're pushing anything back on the survey.
No, I don't think we have enough information here. We still have a few months of work life stuff. I think it's worth it, people really wanna know something. Ed,
Just clarify the expectation, and then just clarification. We expect those responses we expect these responses to come back at your next public meeting.
yes,
Okay, questions, anything?
yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. And so there's another survey, and Ray has offered to walk through very quickly these, we're getting user survey. So it's more limited, we'll take time to show that as well. Thank you, Ray.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so this is the Forget user survey results. All of these results can be found on the town website under the committees and under the Forget ad hoc committee. And under the resources there.
We'll show the PDF.
That one is the endpoint.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I'll just go through just. This survey was sent out to seasonal RV campers, transient RV campers, and tent campers from 2025. And the first question, which is what's following best describes you. The seasonal RV camper was 47% answered, and then 26 was the second for tent camper. How long have you been using Fort Getty? Number one response was more than 20 years with 33%. Number two was 6 to 10 years with 29%. What is your age? The 38.6 is the number one response at 55 years. Second was 17%, 65%. It was evenly split with what is your gender? 50. How often do you visit or use Fort Getty in the summer? The number one answer was I am a seasonal resident of the RV park, 48.1%. How often do you visit Fort Getty during the other seasons, fall, winter, spring? Rarely was the number one answer with 45%. How often do you use the following amenities over the course of the year? So it goes.
The top three.
Oh yeah, the top three, so how? Looks like beaches was number one, 14.04%. The boat ramp was number two, 7.41%. And the fishing dock, 7.27%. The answer being 1 to 2 times a week. Most of them came up with rarely, was the majority. How satisfied are you with the condition of each of the following amenities? Overall parking experience, 64% said satisfied, general accessibility, 16% said satisfied, just 51% said satisfied. Boat ramp, was no opinion, number one answer there, 20%.
How about the lowest, or the lowest?
The lowest satisfaction, you're saying?
Yeah, bathrooms. Electrical bathrooms.
Yeah, campground restaurants, 31.5%. Campground restaurants, number one. Satisfied answers otherwise. Like fishing dock, 7%, satisfied. Boat ramp, 5% unsatisfied, so that's the top. If you're not satisfied with the current condition of the amenities at Fort Getty, please choose up to top 3 amenities. Improvement, restrooms, boat ramp, and other. So other with the, please specify 16 and 22 comments, listed.
We should put that on the survey and realize reading through the responses.
Considering the current condition of Fort Getty, which stated best reflects your opinion, needs minor upgrades was 52%. In the future, what would you prefer the town of Jamestown focus on developing or improving at Fort Getty? Adaptive use of existing batteries or historic structures, that was no opinion. Amphitheater was do not prefer, 49%.
This was the other number one. It's the number one. Bathrooms.
So, yeah. Yeah, bathrooms 37.25%.
So it's, they'd like Jamestown to focus on developing, improving the beaches, camping platforms.
Then, question 12 is please offer any additional comments as I read through all of them. I saw 2 things that I saw. Comments on the contributions to the local businesses was one of them. The other one was requesting improvements to the bathrooms.
Thank you. Any questions for you on have some additions?
I had a question about the number of people that the survey went out to, so we could figure out the response rate for that.
Went on 420. It was about a 14% response rate with 57 responses.
I'm surprised these questions. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is a midpoint report to town council. So this was something that we knew was coming up and scheduled to give an update to town council on February 23rd. So my idea, I know Cassie started actually preparing a formal report. I think it's gonna be more of a presentation, just the process, what we focused on today, kind of findings today, survey results. Anything people want to make sure it's definitely included in the update?
Well, I will provide you with some. Actually,
Okay. Sure. So again, it's gonna be mostly for the process, what we focus on, the deep dive, who we talked to, what we learned, and we learned from today, any progress we've made today and what we plan on doing for the remainder of our time. There's the answer to that. But ultimately, we're working toward a report that has recommendations. Okay, so the next item is public comments. Are there any scheduled comments? Any unscheduled comments? Anybody want to address this item? Want to the podium, sir?
Sure.
Just say your name and address.
Randy check, 80. Yeah. The reason I came up with it, I just want to provide a little bit of context since this practice referred to as limited perspectives. Just kind of came out of the blue and including for me, probably generating about 3%. And I was anticipating this process, that the majority of residents would indicate that they want to see some in future continuing revenue generation from Fort Getty. So I was anticipating that probably be the case. And so my question, both as a resident and somebody who has been part-time working up there the last 2 summers, dealing, interacting with pretty much everybody that comes into the park, is would there be additional options in terms of residents of Jamestown being able to have choices of revenue generation? And so over a short period, I kind of, this is sort of into the morphine we had. And I actually did just have a discussion with this concept, just as I created that situation where I could with one of the town council members. And this idea that I came up with is just to be providing another alternative. And the idea of an event center that's in community recreation center. The reason I couch this as event center is because this would have to do with multi-dual purpose. Generating income from events. Our pavilion is so overpopular. We have people coming out. Peers would love to rent that. Some people are booking in 1 time in advance. And so the idea was something that could do that, plus provide another incredible venue option for town, all town related kinds of activities. And, but with the idea being that it would need to be something, if that happened, that would fit very well in the setting. Would it be something that would sort of fit and adapt to the setting as compared to being some big building with high walls and that sort of thing. So I can, in my own mind, I can see it. I don't have any doubts about the revenue generation part of it. You know, I've looked at similar event centers online with governing board site and all that, and there isn't any doubt. So it's just another but very real possibility in terms of being a revenue generating source for the town. And then as a resident, I did come with a question because I tried to question myself. Why was somebody else sitting on the outside? I came up with what I call a blank question. If there was currently nothing in Fort Getty, nothing said open space, but there was a determination made by the town that Fort Getty needed to generate revenue for the town. And what would the town come up with to do that? And so I just thought that this other option was something that could be considered. I honestly can look at you guys between the eyes and tell you, I do not have a vested interest with. Fortunately, all my relatives live on the West Coast, so I don't have any future kids and grandkids that are going to be enjoying Fort Getty. But I just believe that residents of Jamestown need to have a choice. If there is one, and as I said, I only came up with this idea and have discussed it with very few people. Okay, so
Thank you.
anyway, I just wanted to make that.
Thank you for submitting it. Any other comments? Mr. Wall?
Hi, Hannah Sweat, 34%. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. I just had a couple questions about the survey. Does the survey demographics match the town demographics? And thus, how much are you gonna weigh the survey in your determination? And then, my other question was, oh, are we gonna see the midpoint evaluation? Is that something we're gonna be able to see or hear?
The midpoint report, this is really more comments, but questions, but the midpoint report is just a report to the town council, so it's in public. To the extent that any will be writing these slides to be available. So February 23rd. On the record. I have no idea what the demographics of Jamestown.
Just what you can compare against census data, that would be all we would have.
I guess, so will you compare it and thus see surveys and actual presentation?
We each have a different answer to that. The survey is a tool for us to be informed by and using it as an information source. Everybody was invited to take the survey, the people that were interested to need to get, I value that. It's just tool assessments.
Thank you.
That's my answer to it.
Right, like everyone went on.
Okay, anyone else? Can I accept these? Can I do a motion to accept all of these in one? The next item is communication received, and we received 4, one from Chris Cannon, one from the Jamestown Tree and Preservation Protection Committee, one from Jeffrey Bowl, and one from Randy. Is there a motion to accept these communications?
So,
Is there a second? Roll call vote, Bill Sanders, Richard Smith,
Aye.
Tom Pollard, Bessie West, and the chair votes aye. Okay. So the next item is future meetings, and I think that we all agree with the originally proposed date, February 24th, or the formation. And we proposed February 26th at 1 o'clock. Does that work for people?
that's the worst we.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. So that's the next one. And then, Cody, you could propose some dates in March. So, and I know 1 o'clock is we talk about 26. Okay, so the next item is a workshop, and so we're not adjourning, but we're going to be coming down and going to the workshop, and so there's no mechanism for public comment during this section. This is really just a work session. There will be an opportunity at the next meeting for any public comment, and we are still deliberating what a public session focused on public input will look like at some point. We have talked about that in the next phase. We'd like to get beyond questions that were raised in the survey and have a workshop be focused on substantive proposals for the community to react to. Okay.
Just take a few more minutes.
And I have to leave at 2:45, but the vice chair is going to take over. John Potter when I come.
Yeah, you. Towards the. So it's not, just let me know what you're planning on doing there.
Okay, sounds good.
Test. Mike, so if you can just make sure that you try to hear your voice on the intercom as well. and you sort of attentions. We got a lot of pressure. Then we talked about the boat trailers, the pedestrians that can't, and folks from CSF coming over, kayaks. Not a lot of space here, so adjusting this, allocating was some of those ideas of retreat, you know, pulling that road back. Can we get a safer, more robust walking edge, this northern, edge of perimeter of the park? So I think it's not, we don't want them to have nice views. I think it's like how do you balance all these different needs, and it's this use thoughts and pressure on some of the other uses that Boston. So how can that be distributed? You know, your bundle. How can it be distributed eventually?
When I was heartened by your broad range of some along the slides, but moving them out of serious area perhaps. And I went back to Ed Miller's the town that was that had all that area over. And I then further expanded that because we had used for the but then I was thinking, okay, I will stand up. Can I just like draw on that?
You can.
So if we were to take that from there. Very worried about. And I I was suggesting reading all this up.
I think so.
And talking about roads, possibly even eliminating. So we have green area all around. And having roadway, just set up, coming in is back out here. And these roads obviously have to be left for the RVs. There was one suggestion about tent camping, increasing tent camping. And if we do that, and there's also talk maybe of platforms. I'm not really big on cabins, but in pre area, you could definitely put, you know, some tent camping there, which I don't know if there used to be tent camping in Dutch Island, which looks right across from there, would be beautiful for tent campers. So anyway. But I agree with you know, trying to green up the boundary.
It sounds like the emerging breed. It's intense. Think about a population of 60s and 50s and probably the same number. I mean, and how do we play around getting RVs to higher ground and 10 things to the road? Two, the idea is to just put campers, see if we can't create more open space on the north and more open space on the edges. Do we want to talk about what our bathroom? The one question I have is, what's the optimal way of dealing with the lower bathroom? And technology that allows us to have the simplest test. the simplest task. And the rates of great bathrooms. Then, in my mind, the question becomes more portable toilets, two others. One. It's not clear to me, we need them, those three. I think the question for me is, we gotta look at options and placement.
Yeah, if you look at where the perk test pipes are, right now, it looks like that's the consensus for the new bathroom. That's actually about 800 feet from the first northernmost section, if you take a straight line. And it's approximately 1,200 feet to the tent side. It's not in the middle, it's still a little walk for the tent sites, but as Ed mentioned, was example, was Cleve's or Clevis bathrooms. The $20,000 would be $30,000. So I don't know what you do about secondary bathrooms going in tents. I don't know how you maintain it. But the bathroom where they had both is pretty centrally located. I agree that there needs to be a bathroom. It would be nice to have a bathroom. Get go around if everybody swims down there, try it, whatever. And they understand the bathroom down at the tent site. The only thing good with the bathroom is, where they propose it, it's above that high top line, roughly above the CRMC line. And then it's overflow bathrooms for the pavilion, because if you go to the riverfront, those bathrooms are lined up. So it's probably good traffic ways to get in, and Stoneleach. But if you put the bathroom right where the perk tests are, it's pretty centrally located. It's just a matter of cost for that and then the cost for what the times it's much cheaper, but it's not as nice to use. For the other.
Pride.
Yeah.
Point of pride.
But Beavertail has those bathrooms and they're always clean.
Yeah.
At Beavertail, so you could put one of those in, it's just a
Those
matter
look
of, yeah, they keep them clean.
When it comes to bathrooms, your tent cameras.
You have.
Yeah.
And, voters or which even. I don't have a good sense of how the RV campers use them, since most RV campers have bathrooms. We have.
That was something that I learned in this process from our students who are on the campers. So they said that RV campers really don't use them, it's primarily the tent camping. And now they just French on, which just sounds like a disaster. So I think if we're going to consolidate, we're going to recommend exploring consolidation of tent camping in a particular area, really need to have a solution around restrooms.
One thing about our bathrooms. It's the one that takes over from the walls. It's the one which is.
Both bathrooms at the same time.
Both at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, if there is nothing for outside the city.
We will occasionally have a porta john put over near the pavilion area, depending on, shoulder seasons, but other than that, no.
But are we thinking eliminating in this? The one that's over up on the hill, not that one. Or either one, are we thinking of eliminating them and not using them as bathrooms and having a different setup for bathrooms?
Again, so what I was sort of suggesting, was ultimately. Last season, we got 4, one on lot 22 for tent camping, one out by the dock. One by the pavilion, and there'll be one in the lower bathroom where I think the perk is.
Also want us to think about camping spread out across, right? And like the tent camping. Please, it's in the party. Really should be more concerned.
Saying instead of thinking about consolidating tent camping, because now it is spread out. And that causes challenges in a number of ways, one being bathroom access. Another is HVAC, authorities.
I guess to the right, so we're 10%. Or is it all together because it's a campground?
What's been proposed is 2 separate, but Do you have thoughts about more consolidated?
So we can think about the idea of a facility here that serves the tenants in a certain way too. If there were to be a maintenance building here for the equipment that the town has, I would think that building could include a restroom. What's the staff use currently? They use a porta john.
Say we have a porta john over there, but they'll go to the pavilion, typically if it's available to use bathrooms there, so they'll travel up.
Is it lit, the porta john facilities in this area?
Yeah.
Lighting at night? So I mean, maybe something here, do something for the operations side of things, a small structure, we gotta look at the flood again, but there's already equipment stored there. There's already this activity. If tent camping were expanded, whether that has a shower or not, I don't know at that location, or whether it's just restroom facilities. Then we have these. We talked about a small composting toilet, like West Ferry. Similar setup to a single occupancy like West Ferry to serve this end. Can we get that just one somewhere in here then to serve? Does this redundancy, does it, we've inherited sort of this used to be the power plant actually associated with Ford. It's not even, never was a restroom building. We made it that way. So, and then there's this, which needs work. So maybe something more central here would be at a higher elevation, looking at the mapping, serve, everybody's walking maybe in more of an equidistant, with this supporting the maritime uses and this supporting tent and guardhouse and operations, at least at concept level. I think the big ideas that you've been working on with folks, land use is really important because the restrooms sort of nest into that, but understanding structurally like what you're trying to accomplish in terms of walkability, circulation, and so on. You need to keep that big picture and then look at how these pieces can then fit. And does this need to be here any longer? No, if we're thinking about activating maybe some of this area, maybe this doesn't belong down here, but maybe in a more central location, as long as its profile isn't obtrusive, right? So we've got that challenge on the bench. I think there's a lot of ways to talk about structural roofs. We can talk about things that are cut into the landscape. The flow was very successful. There's ways we can approach new buildings in the same manner that they don't have to be. So I encourage you to think waiting about how that can work. It's more like, where does that use belong? Where's the best site?
There's 2 points on that. The bathroom should be cited. Figure out where to put cameras, what they're used. So, second is just of using existing bathrooms. It's possible. It's very expensive. And structure. That. Just one point on Sarah C. Just to see what from the Earth Commission. We have really touching on.
We've had multiple meetings on touch and go, and there's a huge effort underway, but it may be somewhat hinged on whether or not Islands Conservation Commission would be willing to consider reclassifying the waters by the boat. Which would then allow for an increased use by perhaps even dredging and then a touching. Since it's classified as a class 1, boat ramp touching is not allowed.
Right. I was just thinking that once you moving towards reading on the park and focus is behind that. That's some future day sitting down with students and trying to get them to accommodate the boat, touching boat documents.
Yeah, we've been putting a lot of energy into discussing this with
Right.
CRMC, but their rules are hard and fast in class one waters.
Is it small?
Well, is the South Beach? Which beach? The South Beach.
Billy Beach.
Yeah.
No, those are class two.
Bill, are you saying get rid of roads? Go around.
That's the thought. Yes, and
How do I get to five
putting that.
with all my stuff? How do I get to five with my coolers and friends?
Well,
It's interesting, there used to be a road that was part of the fortification that came. Some reason this road is there. Part of it. That was strong. So in applications. Circulation.
That,
This is all battery and embankment. Awesome. So the road actually fit in the west room and the battery. Right. Been doing a little bit of search. These are the 12-inch gun places. These guys. Awesome. It's a lot to digest in this road, but this is just a lower restroom right here. These are the gun emplacements, the 12-inch and or 6-inch, more or less. So the roadway fish in between here, it kind of came up and went around. So that pattern that you're seeing of these streets is based on this idea of a big circulation route loop, which I think is maybe a fine idea. I think the question is sort of, does that loop make sense now? You need this edge, maybe that loop can be more. The word of maybe it's something in here. But again, we've got existing trees and other features, but if you think about that, maybe this is important. This one is. I'm also wondering, like, is this one important? If we were to consolidate the RVs, because I think when you start to move towards some more open space, it could be used in a lot of different ways. I'm sorry, but you have to.
No, it's okay.
But perhaps circulation, something more like this, this interior road is important to some degree because it's like having good value, keeping the roads. Whether this needs the shapes nice. Moving on, through some terracing, probably because it's but we're keeping maybe in the future, keeping this use more centralized, and you're working on. Maybe this has some type of turnaround at how we. This loop also should serve for trailers. A lot of folks come in and back it and then maybe come up and around park or it type of feature or an investment. But then you start to end up often bringing to standards. Very particular ways. I think if you're a pedestrian, it's much nicer. Consistent walking experience, and it gets pretty. I mean, even there's just some modest landscape that start to control this a bit better in the near term.
have you looked at that?
Or possibly comparison to have RVs here. You could have two.
I think going forward with this sketch and the committee input, we would look, we would look at that. I think then whether how many are transient, seasonal. I think your point was good. I don't know, you might design the sites in a certain way, but. Generally, I think these just inherited the pattern of buildings, but us. So Might actually make some. In the future to kind of maximize, long views. Just knows, I think that as well as the terracing concept.
Thank you.
So we're done some food.
Yeah, how are you doing that time? We're coming up on 3, so that may be a good time to sort of capture where we are today. One of the things I asked is, could you share talk about common priorities and problematic elements. We looked at trying to get together on a common base plan, sketch ideas. I guess I'm looking to see, if you feel like this is moving in that direction of either alternates that might come out of this, moving in a direction of a common base plan that we can take. Listen, I'll start to draw what does that mean, and what does that mean in terms of the number of RVs and sites, some of those adjustments that you touched on. What does it look like to move the tent camping off? Do we need to maintain the same number of tents? That might be an interesting discussion. We started off down below and sort of expanded right up onto the hill to meet the need. Was that the basis of
The original, when the tent split layout, I don't know which one, for
predates.
some reason, I thought they were on the hill first, and then they went and
Oh, moved
opened
them
them up down lower to
Might be
the
on
house.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at what would happen down below, or do we need to maintain the same number? That may be another discussion. Is it essential to maintain the same? I guess one of the other things that I was hearing coming out today is the idea of another venue, like another pavilion or another community space. Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you ever considered if another one were to be added, is that problematically something that could?
Another pavilion type situation.
Right.
I think it would be challenging to manage that, just because we have events in the summertime with, 250 people that will be at those events, parking, and then we have increased activity with the NSF coming up, more people down there, there's gonna be, I just think it'll be a challenge to put it, I mean, not that it's impossible, but I think it would just be a challenge to manage that many vehicles at one time, or now you're gonna say, all right, these are the days you can rent this pavilion, these are the days you can rent the other pavilion, or like, I guess that would be my concern, is just how do you manage how busy it would be, how many vehicles are at the park, which is already a challenge, so then you just add another venue with, depending on the, capacity of that venue, is where, I mean, you could get creative where to put the cars, but there's one road in, there's one road out, right, and there's a lot of, if we're looking at increased use for the public, then it's, could get challenging, I would think.
Yeah, I wonder. So the pressure might be
So you do it,
different, certainly seasonality, in terms of sustained revenue for the town. Better allow 3 months of the summer. Because this use is very land intensive, right? Like it needs a lot of footprint and so on. So if you were to consider an option like us, the pavilion or something uses relatively small footprint, you gotta manage the park. I'm just wondering if that actually becomes like an idea of an alternative, a future phase. Decisions can be made now and we continue to support the current activities, maybe reappropriate some of the lands used, but grow to in the future. Maybe there aren't as many RVs, but this event space or something becomes an option, right? So these 10 sites would go away, that would be offset by this. So you have less cars, less RVs, maybe, but you have this. Anyway, just as a discussion, I know there's correspondence about that communication. I don't know if there's any more thoughts from people just hearing it for the first time. And on the operations side, you're pointing out all the cars, all logistics, but it would have to be maybe with a reduction of RVs, say, some other use to be diminished while all this other plan is brought online.
yeah, if you're reworking the park with that in mind, then it changes things a little bit, I'm kind of thinking about it in the way that it's set up now, I guess.
John Potter got in earlier. That lot.
Maybe, my view is
Is
we
that
should forget about it. Think about how you reconfigure the RV parking and I also think, you know, that we should play with numbers that allow us to, because I think it's almost a no-brainer if we do the if we continue that revenue from those services, then actually we have the ability to, in fact, be irresponsible not to price up to to something more like market rate. I mean, we could essentially take really all the numbers that allows us to free up some space. I don't have a hard and fast rule that says let's put them all in 22. I just think we need to contemplate, right? We've already got campus down there. And we, as long as we can live within the footprint with the boundary areas.
Yeah, it's a lot of land, I think it's 7 acres and, right, it's like you presented. And when we looked at the RV site use, it's also 7 acres, there's a lot of land that's off that consider.
Agreed. Okay, my sense is new pavilion. I mean, as you're thinking about laying out, I mean, as you're thinking about relaying out our use of that concept, I don't think it has a huge amount of momentum on it right now. I would like to suggest we might try to deep dive on it. Just people who express whether we can find. People have said that they would find the pavilion more attractive or more valuable if it was nicer. They could have better events there. Well, I don't know, you know, it feels like we're selling that right now. I don't know what those are, but if we got any evidence that said it might be to figure out how to make our existing pavilion, which is quite successful, incrementally more attractive, rather than have I get your point about 3 or 4 season, right? For sure, one of the things we have to do is just summertime, and that I think is where it's going. But as a stage, you're on the verge.
Yeah, and it may just be sort of a concept, right? Like multiple businesses. You know, if there was a pavilion or some type of structure sort of integrated into the landscape plan, I would think at a higher point could have restrooms attached to it, right? So it would then, you know, I think we have to be thinking for that investment, restroom facility, 3 additional seasons, you know, added to it. And then enhancements to the pavilion that's there, that's interesting. I don't know. I've heard that before, but it is a little bit of an open air sort of experience, and so depending on the type of manager to have, maybe some folks challenged by that. I know there were some improvements planned for the far end of the station and stuff like that, so some of that work just hasn't finished yet. But it's a lot different than the original telephone pole. You know, if people remember the first one that was there was very rustic and nice, and really nice in its own ways. This is very lavish compared to the first one. So we'll see like what improvements might make sense, you know, to sort of maybe weatherize it or durability or those options.
Yeah, I just have one concern that as we keep discussing this, we're moving away from the results of the survey. So we're starting to sound like we're ignoring the survey said again. So it makes it sound like we didn't need to do the survey. If we did the survey, we should at least follow what the survey results on. Which was open space, views. A lot of them want the campus, they want the. So we don't want to go down the long track, say, additional buildings. Additional revenue sources that take away the space, take away the views. Because you're gonna privatize that whole lot, and then eventually you will only have a mini student park because most of it's committed to Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays. For public events that you can't use it, and the public is invited. It's not open to everybody anymore. Right now, the RV, well, at least according to the survey, they wanted them back in 2005, 2006. we seem to be wavering away from what the consensus was. I understand we want to redesign it, maybe. But it seems like we're now heading in a different direction than we asserted. That we wanted this discussion, this would have been a good discussion for September. And do the survey, redesign it. But if the survey results are in, I think we need to follow the lead of the survey results.
Respect it. Let's talk about. Make sure that we. Are all this supposed to be thought was the cameras. Should we have about. I think what I was trying to ask Eric is, his idea of the camera, I think there's a lot of hope.
Oh, and I'm not just
We're
up for all ideas, but I don't want to waver.
Yeah, it was and we were talking about blue sky alternative with no RVs, no camping. A lot of open space. There might be room for maintenance, but in this current set of discussions, I don't think. I didn't hear. There were some suggestions. But what I would throw out is the use of space in what we're looking at as block C. If that did not have our use there, that it is a absolutely view from that location, having perhaps a terrace with some different tables, possibly with if we're doing electric and water, having a hookup for food truck, or how about the oysterman coming up and serving oysters, from 5 to 7 on a summer evening, be a perfect place for having some structure. I mean, not a build structure, but terrace, perhaps with stone wall. And maybe with some, canopies over it or something.
Right. Day sales that go
Yeah.
go away in the winter.
Exactly.
Lot C.
That's
Lot
right,
C.
right. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to take a step back and encourage, when we talk about, we should talk about use, because buildings can be designed in a lot of different ways. I think there may be, when you talk about building a new structure, you think about something up on the ridge that has a high dominant profile and presence. And that's one way to design a building. That's not the only way. So I think it'd be useful just as a conversation to say, does this use potentially make sense to have another venue that provides the opportunity for hosting different events and so on? You can't design it in a way that's integrated into the landscape. And maybe the use makes sense, and then maybe it doesn't. But I think for the end use discussion, the activity is the first piece of what the building, if there is a building, looks like. And I think the same applies to your concept of terrace on the corner. I think that could be, again, things done with green roofs, working with the technology. I think you could retain all the views and still integrate into the site. I think you could also enhance some of the experiences of rooftop gardens, rooftop terraces, that essentially is just a continuation of the ground plane. I think we give you some visuals on how those things could work, but sort of, does that use make sense here? If we think the use works, then you can migrate into how you address the design of your structures. Anyway, I know we're getting, I don't know if there's any other thoughts or comments, and certainly you need to stick around afterwards to talk with us, but try to get the sketch into a translation for your next meeting, and we'll go with that going forward.
Eric, how are you synthesizing what you heard? It's a brief for what you invest time in, or were you? I mean, we've said a lot of things, some of it's contradictory. And in some ways we're wrapping the meeting without our final committee member. I think it might be useful if you guys summarized how you're going to interpret today's meeting and just send it back to us for us to read and comment on before you spend a ton of hours development.
Understood. I think if you're all right with this, I think we'd propose like a graphic response. So it would be, you have 11 by 17s in front of you, that size, it might be that size. Alyssa, what do you think, like a sketch diagram with labels, leaders, call outs, sort of different ideas that people put forward, kind of captured and saying, we might number them, not in them prioritization, but just to say this, here's idea A, B, C, D. This is some stuff that was talked about, but sometimes the words get lost. I think a graphic response would keep us all on the same page. But yeah, we'd be happy to keep that going. Did you say your next one's the 26th, your next meeting? Is that confirmed?
26.
Yes.
So the deliverable would be the Thursday before?
We can do up to the Monday before, so it's the Thursday hours.
Consolidate what we can, be shorthand sketch style, but to try to capture. We'll capture the yellow flip book of the salient comments and then we'll have that for you for later.
Thank you very much.
You talked about some different designs on buildings. You just, you said that they wouldn't be blocking view.
Sure.
Aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, I'll try. So I mean, I think that. I think the building is challenging, I'm not sure. It's an easy. Or a quick answer, but I think when you look at the topography of the land. You know, if the slope kind of comes down like this to the water down here, you know, buildings can be built in a way that sort of engages the site, right? So, you know, this might be some type of wall, roof system, foundation down here, where people could be, you know, in this space. This could be a walkout, as you're saying, walkout terrace at an elevation. The ability to have views, plantings with people inside, this could be accessed here. This top could be green, so you could have vegetation, this could be a green roof. You know, when I say green roof, like with layers of planting media and soils. The roof could be essentially on top. And the landform could be reshaped, so you still have views when you're up above that carry out. You don't necessarily have to see this building in the way it's sited into. So if the shoreline in plan view looks like this, you know, this structure might be able to be sort of underground for this piece with a door on the side. But then a terrace that terrace could kind of engage, you know, potentially this edge. However this works, but the idea that you have a green roof that doesn't, you don't have a structure sticking up above. So I think there's different ways to approach it. You know, if you have this landform, the conventional way of building buildings, and this is the way the old buildings were built out there. You know, the barracks, they sat like this, right? And very prominent roof line and our windows. But there's no reason that the building can't be cut into the hillside and sited in a way that still allows open views, and you have a space that's interior, open to the air, but not as high profile, not as visible.
Yeah, I would support Rich's comment that where we saw the importance of revenue through the survey, anything that we do or suggest will be self-funding. Considering.
Buildings. Yeah, I mean, I'll leave that to the committee whether that's something that's entertained as a concept. It would obviously be a revenue generator, so an offset to revenue.
Right.
Currently, the land intensive use is generating a certain amount of income. If you looked at a structure or some other use, can that generate the same amount of income? I don't know. You know, someone would have to sit down and sort of look at that and see just what the return on investment.
So as part of Blue Sky, just having an idea of where that one is saying. You sure?
Okay.
Most people will say that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Useful.
Yeah.
the educational call. I think we're concluded with all the business of this meeting.
If we just have a motion to adjourn, then just.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Can I just get who's second?
There's the next 2 seconds.
Conservation board.
Wait, what's this?
Yes, back this up.
So we can't put a close out.
Put on the south.
South